Okay, get us started. I'm not going to use a separate paper for warm up, but you can. It won't really matter. I just figure I just do it on this sheet. I had a student actually ask an interesting question yesterday about doing shading on objects, and the class isn't really about that. So I was like, well, it's a lot to unpack really quickly. And, they're kind of looking for an answer. Like, oh, you just do ABC and everything works really nice. And it's kind of like, well, you just look at a lot of things and try to replicate it and practice. But I gave them a little tip. I thought it might be an interesting light intro into the drawing of just producing a little index of different degrees of shade. So 0 to 100%, something small, and see if we can turn that into a bit of a drawing. So I'm going to start just by making, 4 or 5 boxes or something down the side of my page to develop that little index, and then we'll make a little more abstract map with them afterwards. And hopefully it's not too slow to draw this way and we can make enough with it, but start small will probably be good. The shading can take a while. I'm going to use a bit of a thicker marker thing, but a pencil will work fine too. And so just starting out somewhere, if you're working on a scrap for this, it's kind of the warm-up section or somewhere around the edge to keep it in view. And start making little maybe 1-inch-ish boxes. Getting a feel for the paper and the instrument that we're using, and spacing them out about equally an inch each, just working in some kind of line, horizontal or vertical, doesn't really matter. Starting to pay attention to how you're drawing those squares. We'll draw several squares or any other shapes you like, but kind of repeatedly. So having a little mindfulness and insight into the way you're moving the hand, the way you're shaping that space. Any way is fine. We all kind of draw a square a bit differently. Sometimes left to right, sometimes up to down, sometimes around the corners, and sometimes all the way around the perimeter, or each time a little different because of body's position, and something we can just kind of notice and watch as we move along. And with these, we begin to fill them in. The number doesn't really matter so much. It'll just give us a few to experiment with the range. The first one at the bottom or top being very easy, where we like to start, is 0, and it has nothing in it. So we can move to the second one and give it a light cross-hatching, pretty well spaced out, probably even more than might feel comfortable from a shading perspective if you have experience with it, but somewhere in the 20%-ish range, 20-25%, maybe even a little less. I'm just going to move along them and slowly tighten up those diagonal hatches, bring them a little closer each time. Exactness of this is not super important, but just building a density of line in the space bounded by those boxes, so they start to feel a little darker, a little heavier, bringing tone into the page. And if you mess one up, it's okay. This is just our index and our starting point to kind of warm up to seeing the different values. I'm doing it by hand, so stuff can be wobbly. So spacing gets a little off. It's more just a general darkening or lightening of that square. As we do this in the larger exercise, really have to slow our attention down to it, bring our mind into it, to not run away from ourselves. So I'm getting towards the top. They're getting very tight, almost full here. Just small amounts of the paper showing through here and there. Hints that a little light is leaking through whatever this might be applied to. Depending on what tool you're using, seeing how the speed goes. If it's going a little slow, and where you take the time with the warm-up, kind of get the range that we get to. We have one more here, and I'm going to take that one as my transition point. Just even out, slow down my strokes a little. These are right next to each other, one touching the next. Basically fully filling in that square, but in no rush to prepare my mind and my hand for that working at an even pace, not trying to fill anything specifically, just drawing through an application of a tonal value, spending some time with it. And that last bit of warm up to the hand to move in a direction. I've been moving in the same direction each time, lower left to upper right. Suppose we could do a little experiment if you want and what feels good, but you probably started out kind of a way that was natural to your drawing and I didn't think about it. And maybe we can bring a moment of reflection and preparation to that. How did it feel? Was the movement fluid enough to control that you can keep it up? And through the exercise, continue with that, or if you'd like to experiment with trying some things different to play around with the tone and perception, feel free. I'll move over into the more free space of my paper. I think I might even turn and draw a little diagonally, just feeling a little tension in my elbow today. And we'll work on just a series, again, of squares, but this time being more playful, more free with their placement, letting them overlap each other, expand out, and make kind of a stacking, interlocking territory. And along the way, drawing a square, choosing roughly a shade from the side, applying it, and then moving to the next square so they begin to overlap, densify, and spread out. And again, square, circle, squiggly shape, anything is fine. Just thought the square works well with the hatch. Taking a couple of breaths to prepare in that new empty space. If you did it on a separate page, maybe setting it to the side or letting the memory pull it in. Filling out the body with an inhalation and releasing into a nice relaxed posture with the exhalation. And because of the time of this, we'll start fairly small, maybe similar size, plus or minus a little bit as I work along with the little rectangles. And one to begin, perhaps make one overlapping relationship as a starting point, two rectangles sharing an edge or a corner as a start to give us an insight into tone and overlay, and then picking one, choosing the rough destination for the tone layering from your index or from your minds, remembering and bringing that in all the way across the square through the overlap, aiming for consistency in each of these new moments or iterations. We'll be aiming for consistency, if that means slowing down, that's okay. There's no fixed number of squares to get to. Maybe we just do two, but we can probably have a few more in the time we have. And as we're using the first few to really find that evenness or consistency, just noticing how it feels, the directionality of your drawing motion, the difference between the corners and the big open spaces. You may notice some feelings of unease or engagement in keeping things parallel and consistent can take a lot of time and practice. And we breathe through any of those feelings of resistance. They can be a little wobbly in the aggregate, in the smooth, quicker exercise. They'll build up into something of their own character, and many of the little wobbles will start to drift into the background. And finding a rhythm for expanding the field, these overlapping rectangles, 2 at a time, 3 or 4 to fill out some space, coming back through and bringing the application of tone. Whatever begins to work for you. I feel like 1 at a time is a little too back and forth for myself. Something to notice in your way of engaging with the paper and bringing that noticing and providing the space on the page for your own rhythm of action, and then letting that rhythm sink in as you work through each new territory. One line next to the other, one line at a time, taking up a little more space from the white page behind, shifting the value of the boundary, heavier, lighter than its neighbors, overlapping into that zone of interference that may occasionally find dissonance, may complete a shape, break a shape. Just an interesting moment of interstitial overlay. And you have a little bit of a rhythm going, a few shapes working, a sense the hand is warmed up, feel its motion. Maybe things start to get a little straighter, maybe they start to get a little more wobbly, whatever you notice there. Let's bring breath into that attention. First, just listening to it. What's your rate of breathing now that you've been working a little while? Is there an urgency or holding in place? A relaxation or softness? Maybe all over the map a little bit. With it in mind, whenever you're ready to begin working on your next series of parallel lines, we'll give breath to each one or each grouping in the series as the lines are dynamic, finding a place for the rhythm to begin and engage and then play itself out. So noticing the breath in, bringing the exhalation into alignment with the movement of the pen, letting the exhalation finish out naturally, then re-beginning the inhalation on the finish or movement of a stroke, re-beginning the exhalation on the finish or beginning of a stroke. These might bring a slight pause, that time of recollecting and being sure that the breath comes inside in a clean rhythm, catching up in the time between spaces, time between squares, leaning in and listening to that cycle of the breath, aligning it with the hands in the time of engagement. A little application of exercise, a little application of repose. Breathing in to begin action. Breathing out to continue. Follow the action. This may bring steadiness, may also bring oscillation, transition from fast and slow, difference on the inhalation or the exhalation. You could bring a little rhythm, staccato, the pauses here and there. Noticing the natural way your body begins to align between the movement of the hand and the movement of the breath, and letting the mind or attention play a role in that. All of them, once engaged, share the space of action, of mindfulness. They begin to work together, sometimes one guiding a little bit, others following, giving feedback, shifting prominence, and eventually aligning into a natural rhythm of movement, able to handle the dynamic shifts, position, length, orientation of the hand, the dynamic shifts, spacing when they collide, letting the mind and body practice a bit of resilience and engagement. Another round of a few more overlapping squares, a few more layers of tone and value. And then maybe spend a few minutes drawing around space, experimenting with it, seeing where my eyes can follow and track. The drawing of new regions, new overlapping squares, a chance for, again, a bit of a pause, a rest on the action of that repetitive parallel line, having to work more dynamically around, giving the muscles a change of pace without a full break, and then coming back into the rhythm. Noticing a little more with the eyes where you've chosen to do your kind of value applications. Are they more on the heavy, more on the light, spread well out? Let that noticing sink in for a bit. And perhaps it brings with it some suggestions of where the next one can go, unique to your drawing, your engagement with that page at the moment. You begin to guide the drawing with the eyes, with a little bit of the creative insight. And follow that even tempo of the parallel lines, filling in some space. Follow that even tempo of the breath, rising and falling, expanding and contracting. Starting to notice if there's any difference from the place of beginning and now. More or less comfort with the movement, more or less confidence with the spacing. Each can change over time. Some builds as the muscles, the hand all get warmed up and work better with the eye and the mind. Some build and then drop again as fatigue may set in, the tension may get tired. All those ebbs and flows will take place across the page. You can observe them, notice a little more about ourselves, about our capabilities at the moment. As we'll take a few minutes of quiet drawing. Feel free to keep expanding the territory, letting them move around, or as you take it in with a few breaths of repose and observation, you may see other possibilities for interacting with the pen, drawing into the new space, seeing where it might go. Feel free to explore and experiment the next 4 or 5 minutes. Approaching the end of the 9:30 time, and let the hand start to wind down. You may finish out an area, line. Let the attention come back to where you are. Notice the feet on the floor, or the way you're sitting in the chair. Maybe shift a little bit side to side. You can continue drawing or let it disengage whenever you have reached a point of stopping. But that re-engaging with the senses around, removing the offhand, flexing the toes, the thing that starts to remind the body to come back to its whole self. And as your pen or pencil comes to a rest, giving the shoulders a nice roll back a few times, a nice roll forward a few times if you can. Bringing the hands together, interlocking the fingers, and rolling those wrists as that hand has been engaged a lot, doing the repetitive strokes for the tone, is to make sure all those muscles stretch out a little bit so they can come into a state of relaxed engagement. A few pumps of the hand or wiggles of the fingers, a little turning, rotating side to side, everything coming back into its natural state. A good breath in and a nice, clean, heavy exhalation as you return to your space and prepare for the rest of your day.